In this clip, we'll explore how V-Ray for Maya embeds itself into the Maya UI and get you familiar with generally how V-Ray works within Maya. Let's start with the scene file bird_start.ma, which gives us a blocked out crow model here in the scene and a camera called Camera 1. V-Ray, like other renderers in Maya, is a plugin. After installing and licensing V-Ray, you need to first load the plugin and then set it as your renderer in Maya. Go to Windows, Settings Preferences, and then the Plugin Manager. Now, scroll down and you'll find V-Ray in your plugins. Click Load to load the plugin. Click Auto Load if you want it to automatically load the next time. Now, to set V-Ray as your renderer, open Render Settings, and for the Render Using drop-down menu, select V-Ray, and you can see that the tabs in the render settings have changed to bring up V-Ray's controls. Now, we'll be covering these tabs more in depth as we continue throughout this course, but here's a brief overview to get your bearings. The V-Ray tab controls the sampling in your render, which helps set the overall quality of the image. By default, we're set to progressive sampling, which processes the image for a specified amount of time, or to a specified noise level, both of which you can control here. The GI tab is how you control all things global illumination in your scene, as well as adding and controlling any caustic effects from things like glass. The Settings tab allows you to change how the system responds, such as with memory usage or turning on and off distributed rendering and so forth. The Override tab allows you to override scene elements such as turning on and off lights or textures or certain types of geometry, as well as setting up environments. You can also access volume rendering here, such as rendering fog and atmospheric effects. The Render Elements tab allows you to render your scene into image component passes, also known as AOVs. And finally, IPR adjusts settings for V-Ray's interactive rendering, also known as IPR, which we'll take a look at in a later clip. Now, let's render this bird real quick. Switch to the Camera 1 view and click the render icon, and V-Ray renders the view to the V-Ray frame buffer, also known as the VFB. Now, this replaces Maya's render view and gives you a lot more control and options. Should you wish to use Maya's render view, in the render settings, in the Common tab, click off the Use V-Ray VFB option and you'll be rendering right back into Maya's render view. I recommend, however, using the VFB right from the start. So I'll set myself back to get the VFB. I'll go over the VFB more in the next clip, as well as throughout this course, because it's pretty feature rich. Now, V-Ray is pretty well integrated into Maya, and it's fairly intuitive, especially if you already know how to render in CG. For example, you'll notice there's a V-Ray shelf in the UI. Now, if you don't see your shelf, you can add it easily by going to Render Settings, Settings tab, and in the V-Ray UI section, click Create Replace V-Ray Shelf button. The shelf itself has often used functions with V-Ray, like creating lights, which are these 5 icons here. Of course, just like any other Maya shelf, it's fully customizable to the features that you like to use. Now we can see in our current render that we're using Maya's default lighting, as there are no lights in the scene. Go ahead and in the shelf, click on the V-Ray dome light icon, which places a dome light in your scene, giving you an even lighting all around the bird in the scene. Now render the scene again and you have that nice lighting. In the Create menu, when you go to create a light, the V-Ray lights are included there for you as well. Maya lights and shaders work fine when rendering with V-Ray, but it's more physically accurate to use V-Ray lights and materials whenever possible. You can always mix and match Maya and V-Ray lights and shaders in the same scene with no ill effects. This crow, as you can see, is entirely shaded with Maya materials like Blinn and Lambert, and it renders just fine. But again, you can achieve more accurate results when using V-Ray specific lights and shaders, which we'll explore in later clips. At the bottom of the Create menu is a V-Ray submenu, giving you access to create a host of other V-Ray nodes, such as proxies, tune lines, and FIR, to name just a few. You're also going to find V-Ray integrated into the Hypershade, where you can filter V-Ray nodes easily to distinguish one type from another. Lastly, one other common place that you'll find V-Ray integrated into the UI that I want to tell you about is in an object's attributes. When you have a DAG node selected, for example this chest, you can add various V-Ray specific attributes for a variety of reasons, such as setting an object ID, which is terribly useful in compositing when using mats. Now, when you select a shape node, you can have more specific V-Ray attributes that you can add that affect the rendering of that object, such as subdivisions, or adding controls for any displacements on that geometry. Now, we'll cover a lot of this throughout the course as we go along lighting a populated scene. But for now, in this clip, we've shown you how to enable V-Ray for Maya, as well as give you a primer on where in the Maya UI you can find various V-Ray functions.